Welcome to this episode of our Patent Behavior Bytes summer series dedicated to families, educators, community members, and students preparing for the return of school in the fall of 2020. Please note, no one at the time of this recording knows what the fall opening will look like, but we have invited folks with various backgrounds and experiences to share best practices and resources.
Welcome to Patent's Behavior Bytes series. My name is Sandy Shacklety-White, and I'm an educational consultant for Patent at the East Office in Malvern. Joining me today is Chelsea Melrath from Chester County Government Services, where she is a coalition coordinator and trauma specialist. She will be sharing information with us today about the impact of the pandemic on our youth and as we prepare for returning to school in the fall. Chelsea, thanks for being here today. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for having me, Sandy. I'm excited to be here to be able to talk a little bit about how we can really provide that hope for our children and youth, specifically who are now impacted by the trauma inflicted by COVID-19. So again, I am the coordinator of the Chester County ACEs Coalition, and I am also a trauma specialist with the Chester County Health Department. So I said the term ACEs as far as Chester County ACEs Coalition, but what exactly is that? It actually is derived from a study that was conducted in 1997, over 20 years ago, that was called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. Two researchers who were in the Southern California area decided to survey over 17,000 HMO members at their annual exams. So what they did was they gave the patients a survey that consisted of 10 questions in 3 different areas: abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. So abuse, they asked questions of whether or not you have been physically, emotionally, or sexually abused, if you've been neglected, or as far as household dysfunction, they asked questions such as, did you witness domestic violence in the home? Were there any parental separation or divorce? Did you have a parent or a guardian who went to prison? Or if a parent or guardian had any kind of mental illness or substance use disorder in your childhood. So they gave the patients 10 questions. It was yes or no questions. And for every yes that the patient had responded, you received a point. And then at the end of that survey, you added up your points. And so what that means is that would be your ACE score. So your ACE score could be 0 to 10. After they received these results, they then compared the ACE score that they received to later health outcomes and well-being. So they looked at all of really the significant public health concerns, such as cancer, diabetes, strokes, mental illness, suicidality, addictions, and went on, and really looked at the number of ACE scores compared to these health outcomes. And what they found was truly staggering. The study was really important because of some of the major key findings that they found. They found out that ACEs are extremely common. So 64% of people in the study reported at least one ACE score. So 64% of these people had experienced some kind of potentially traumatic experience in their childhood. And nearly 1 in 6 people reported 4 or more ACEs. So there's a lot of us who have really experienced some potentially traumatic things in our childhood. And I think that it was way more common than what they had originally thought. They also found that there is a dose-response relationship between the number of ACEs and negative health outcomes. So as the number of ACEs increased for a person, so did the likelihood that they would experience some negative health outcomes later in life. So for instance, an ACE score of 4 or more in a person would mean that they're 2 times as likely to become a smoker, or they're 7 times more likely to become alcoholics. They also found that with a person who had an ACE score of 4 or more, that increased the risk of emphysema or chronic bronchitis by nearly 400%, and attempted suicide by 1,200%, compared to a person who had an ACE score of 0. So again, they just found that these ACEs are a serious and costly public health issue. And lastly, they found through this study that ACEs are associated with early mortality. So if you have an ACE score of 6 or more, your life expectancy decreases by 20 years. So these findings, they're extremely important. And I think when the researchers found out about this and they looked at the information, I think that they thought there was going to be this huge explosion of research, of people reaching out and saying, oh my gosh, like we need to do something about this. And unfortunately, there wasn't too much of that at that time, but throughout this 20 plus years that this research has come out, there has been some really significant research that has come out. So for instance, there has been a Philadelphia Urban ACEs study that really looked at additional factors. They looked at not only the original 10 ACEs, but also additional ACEs. They looked at bullying, neighborhood violence, racism, and again, compared those experiences to later health outcomes, and they actually found very similar results. So what we can say is that trauma is not just limited to ACEs. Yes, we focus on ACEs. I think that this is a term that we're commonly using just because it really was the first landmark study within the trauma movement, but there are other types of trauma.
And before we continue on, if you could clarify or just make sure I understand, just because you've been so many traumatic events in your childhood does not mean that you're going to die at a young age, right?
No, it definitely doesn't mean that. And I know that looking at some of these statistics, you can kind of say, oh my gosh, this is going to happen to me, or, you know, it's a little scary. But what it just means is that
they're at risk.
Yes, they are at risk. They are at risk.
But
so
there are ways to get assistance to be more resilient and bounce back and cope with those traumas that we've experienced.
Absolutely, and we will review a little bit of those further on in the slides. But yes, it doesn't mean that you're doomed. It doesn't mean that that's going to happen to you. It just means that this is what they found in the original study, and now that this information is out there, we can focus on that, and we can say, okay, you know, I may have had these experiences in my childhood, but what can I do, and what can I put in place? What are some of those protective factors that I can surround myself with so that that doesn't happen? And the great thing is that we can bounce back, and there is that resilience and hope piece for all of us.
Good to know.
Yes. Thank you, Sandy. So then we're talking about trauma throughout, you know, this presentation, or, you know, I think trauma is this huge buzzword right now. Everybody's kind of talking about it. So what exactly do we mean when we're talking about trauma? We're referring to intense and overwhelming experiences that involve serious loss, threat, or harm to a person's physical and or emotional well-being. That you can experience trauma at any time in your life, and it may be just one single traumatic event, or it could be a series of events that are repeated over many years. So other, you know, examples of trauma could be natural disasters, car accidents, even COVID-19 and this pandemic that we're experiencing right now. You know, it's truly a collective traumatic experience that we're all going through.
Right.
And I think that it's really important to recognize that this is causing some stress to a lot of us. It's threatening us, potentially harming a lot of us. And so that can cause a lot of uncertainty and stress around it, which is referred to as a trauma. So how exactly does trauma affect our bodies? You know, we can now link these experiences to affecting our physical well-being, but how does that happen? So imagine yourself in a forest and a bear is coming at you, running towards you. All of a sudden, your pupils dilate, your heart's pounding, you're breathing really fast, you're tensing your muscles, your palms are really sweaty because you are prepared to either fight, flee, or freeze. So our bodies automatically produce this response. The amygdala reacts to the threat. So your brain's saying, okay, there's a bear, it's coming at me. The hypothalamus activates the sympathetic nervous system and releases all of this adrenaline going through your body. It releases cortisol. So you're alert, you're ready to either fight, or freeze. And that's great because our bodies we need to be able to prepare to do those things in order to protect ourselves. This is a threat that is potentially going to harm me. So our bodies need to know how to do this and need to know how to activate in that way. And that's great if we're in a forest and there's a bear coming at us. But what if that bear is really a parent or a guardian that comes home in a fit of rage every night? Or they're drunk or high when they come home and you're scared. We all have stress, and some stress is really good stress. So we have positive stress in our lives, and that could be, just being anxious for your first day of school or work. Some of our kiddos are really going to experience this with going back to school this year, and just depending on really how that looks. And that's our body's normal and healthy stress response to a situation or something that's going on that kind of gives us a little bit of that anxiety or stress, and that's positive stress. We all need that stress in our lives. And then there's tolerable stress. So that's when your body stress response system is activated. It's a little bit more long lasting, or to a more severe event, but we have supportive buffers in place. So for example, if we lost a member of our family and we're grieving, and obviously that's a stressful event and it could be a little bit more long lasting. However, we have those supportive people in our lives that are going to make sure that we're getting through it and to kind of calm us down and to be there for us. When we're talking about trauma and we're talking about these adverse childhood experiences and the fight, flight, or freeze response system, and really how that's affecting our body, we're really talking about toxic stress. That prolonged activation of the body stress response to frequent, intense situations or events. So again, that's that constant activation of the fight, flight, or freeze response. And really the wear and tear that that's doing on our bodies over and over and over again. So witnessing domestic violence in the home, that chronic neglect, not knowing where you're going to get your next meal, or the bear or your parent or guardian coming home in a fit of rage every single night. So it's that constant activation, your body saying always that I have a threat, something's going to harm me, and our body's constantly being activated. It really does a job on our bodies, and it can really break us down.
So, and just to clarify, there are some people may be able to rebound from a certain stress. So the definition of stress for each person could be totally different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think
and their awareness of their body's reactions, that whole mind-body connection and response to the stressor.
Absolutely. And it also is just really having those supportive buffers in place. Do we have someone that we can go to, that we can release some of this tension, that we can express what's going on in our lives, that we feel safe with? And if we have those buffers in our lives, it's more likely that we're really going to be able to get through these events or situations in a more healthy, tolerable way. But it's when we're really talking about trauma and its effects on our bodies, we're talking a lot about that toxic stress and the activation of the stress response system. So then what are the signs and symptoms of a student experiencing trauma, or really any person experiencing trauma? So these are just a few reactions. Emotional reactions could be depression, hopelessness, shame, worry, Physical reactions could be stomach aches or headaches, fatigue. Some behavioral reactions to trauma could be a student being maybe uncooperative or argumentative, engaging in high-risk behaviors. And then some cognitive reactions could be forgetfulness or inability to focus, or having some flashbacks. So I think when I look at this list, I see a lot of things that like really anybody could be experiencing and going through for a multitude of different reasons. But when we're talking about how trauma affects us, I think what we really need to remember and what we need to focus on is we need to think about that student or that person's baseline. So if we have a student that's coming into a classroom that is usually happy and getting great grades and is sociable and just seems like they're doing well, and that's kind of their baseline, that's usually how they come into school. When all of a sudden they start coming into school and maybe they're not as happy, or they're not really engaging with their friends, or they're getting these grades that maybe their grades are slipping, that's when we really, our red flags are going up and we really need to pay attention to them. So it's all about just remembering what a person or a student's baseline is and how they normally function. And if you see them all of the sudden responding or reacting in a very different way, then really just being mindful of that and maybe digging a little bit deeper to see if they're potentially experiencing some of these trauma reactions.
And just to kind of clarify, it's not just a one day, even a couple of days of showing these unusual, atypical behaviors for that individual, but more that's more intense, more frequent, long-term, the duration of it. And clearly it means you've got to know your child or the youth. If you're a parent, obviously you would know your child.
Right.
But if you're a caregiver, day caregiver, a teacher who may be watching this video, that's where rapport is really going to make a difference in helping children who are struggling with dealing with a toxic stress and trauma.
Yes. So you have to know that child, and you have to know how they usually function and really what their demeanor is on a typical basis. So you're right. You have to have that rapport with them. And if you just see some of these signs or these symptoms that they're just not the same, that's just, like I said, those are your red flags. Those red flags should be going up and you should be saying, what's going on here? There may be something a little bit deeper.
And then trying to find help for them. Absolutely,
yes. So prevention, how can we prevent ACEs and trauma from happening to our youth? This image is from the CDC. They list some protective strategies in order to prevent ACEs or trauma, as well as mitigate the harms associated with ACEs or trauma. And the reality is that we have a ton of resources that are available within our communities who are doing exactly this. So for instance, strengthening economic supports for families. We know that poverty, homelessness, food insecurity, these are all things that affect kids, and they could be a potential trauma for children and for families. So we can help families by strengthening those household financial securities, or, such as referring families to rental assistance programs or food banks, or really just putting those services and resources in place for families so that a child isn't concerned about whether or not the heat is going to be on when they come home, or their electric's going to be on, or where their next meal is coming from. Another one is providing quality care and education early in life. There's really great programs such as Head Start that's out there. A lot of the programs with the IUs are really focusing on that education early in life. And having that family engagement. There's also childcare subsidies that are really, focused on providing families with the best quality of childcare possible. And like I said, just really getting that education early on in their lives. And then additionally, intervening to lessen harms and prevent future risk. There's a lot of, this is why the Chester County ACEs Coalition's mission is so important. We really try to educate and get information out there and just have people be aware of what trauma can do to someone, and that just provide that hope and resiliency piece in order to offset the cycle of trauma. We're going out there and we are educating primary care facilities or behavioral health facilities, mental health facilities on trauma. And so really making sure that everyone is educated in this so that they're able to intervene and to prevent future risk. It's just extremely important for everyone to know this information. So these are just a few examples of and some strategies of what we can do in order to prevent ACEs and trauma. Additionally, on our website, ccacescoalition.com, we do have a list of this list of protective strategies. And then we also have links to services and providers specifically within Chester County who are doing these already. So if you're interested in maybe connecting anyone to any of these strategies, please, anyone can go on our website and check that out.
If they're not from the Chester County, Delaware County, Montgomery County area, since this is across the state, are there likely other similar organizations in counties across Pennsylvania?
Yes, there are. We have our surrounding counties listed on our website as far as trauma or ACEs initiatives within their communities. We actually have their contact information on our website. But I think a lot of counties or areas and communities throughout Pennsylvania, throughout the country right now, are really focusing on this. And there should be information out there of where you can go. Also, acesconnection.com lists initiatives that are going on throughout the country. And so I know they would be a great resource to be able to go on there to seek the initiatives just specifically within Pennsylvania.
Great.
This concludes another Patent Behavior Bite. Remember, this is just a bite of behavior. We'll see you next time.